Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of the most unwanted job descriptions in medieval Europe, the executioner. And that's saying something in a time when leech wrangler and plague cart driver were actual careers. From swinging the sword of justice to being feared, shunned, and spiritually exiled. The life of a medieval executioner was a paradox, essential but never welcome. You weren't chosen. You were born into it, not with a calling, but with a curse. So before we dive in, maybe leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight, and if you'd ever consider marrying the local executioner, no judgment. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you've just been born. Congratulations. The room smells like smoke, sweat, and boiling herbs. You cry, because that's what babies do, but no one seems especially overjoyed. You are wrapped in wool, laid not beside a mother's prayer beads or a carved wooden toy, but near a blade. Not ceremonial, not decorative, just there, waiting. No one speaks your name loudly. Outside, the village continues its life. Someone sharpens a hoe, someone else gathers eggs. But in this house, the only thing sharpened is steel. The blade that ended lives yesterday will one day belong to you. And you know what? That's it. No choice. No career counseling. No pivoting into medieval graphic design. Your path was forged the moment your father raised his axe before a crowd. Now it's your turn. Most babies get a cradle song. You get silence. Your mother rocks you with tired hands. Your father looks on, not with pride, but with resignation, like a man passing down an heirloom he secretly hoped would rust away. You are the latest in a line of men who end lives for a living. Not out of malice, not even out of justice, simply because someone has to, and that someone is always the son of the last someone. There is no celebration. No one from the village stops by with gifts. No midwife offers congratulations. The baker's wife won't even loan a blanket. She says it might carry unholy energy. Your mother doesn't argue. She just pulls your covering tighter and closes the shutters. By the time you're toddling, the other children already avoid you. Not because you've done anything wrong. Not yet. But because your last name sounds like punishment. Your family sits alone in church, if you're even allowed inside. Some towns forbid executioners from taking communion, lest your hands taint the wine. One boy whispers that your breath can curdle milk. Another says your eyes are cursed. You're 5. You've never held a blade. Still, no one offers you bread at the village feast. Your toys are carved from leftover scaffold wood. Your bedtime stories include phrases like drawn and quartered. You don't ask why the pigs scream when your father practices. You already know. When most children turn 10, they learn to plow, to shoe a horse, to read, if their family's lucky. You learn tendons, joints, the way a neck bends before it breaks. Your father shows you how to oil the axe so it doesn't rust. Then he teaches you where to swing so it doesn't bounce. These are your math lessons. Your geometry classes. Strike clean, he says, and they'll forget you were ever there. But they don't forget. They never do. You're not the executioner yet, but you're already treated like one. The blacksmith won't make you a belt. The baker hands you bread with tongs. One woman spits every time you pass. Not at you, but close enough to make her point. The axe becomes part of you long before you lift it. You polish it, carry it, learn its weight. Your father lets you feel the steel, then pulls it away. Not yet, he says, but soon. You don't play pretend. You rehearse. You memorize the creak of the gallows platform. You know how many steps it takes to walk to the block. You understand that you will never be a part of the crowd, only the reason it gathers. At night, you lie awake and hear the wind rattle the shutters. But sometimes it's not the wind. Sometimes it's your father's breath. Heavy, haunted. He never talks about his first time. No one ever does. Maybe he's doing you a kindness. Maybe he just knows. You'll find out soon enough. There's a moment, quiet but sharp, when you realize the truth. Not that you're different. You've always known that. It's the realization that everyone else needs you, but wishes you didn't exist. That they'll cheer the verdict, watch the punishment, but never offer you a seat at the feast. That your hands will be stained, not by blood, but by association. You're justice's shadow, and shadows are not invited to dance. You don't resent them. Not exactly. You understand. Who want to share bread with the one who ends their neighbor's life? Who wants to marry into a family that whispers with iron breath? You are not the villain. You are not the hero. You are the consequence. So here you are, just a boy, just born, and already marked. You didn't ask for this, but it asked for you. And in this world, that's the same thing. The town needs you, desperately, but only from distance. You are necessary, but never welcome. And you'll carry that truth like you'll one day carry the axe. Carefully, steadily, and alone. The village is small, a few dozen thatched roofs, a crooked chapel, and one well that everyone shares. It's the center of everything. Gossip echoes off its stones, and children throw pebbles into its depths when they're bored. You approach it one morning, wooden bucket in hand, just like every other child. But the space around you feels wrong. As you near, the others suddenly find reasons to leave. One girl remembers she forgot to feed the hens. Two boys walk away without a word, one avoiding your eyes. The other staring as if you're a ghost he's not supposed to acknowledge. Your footsteps don't echo. They clear the road. At first, you think it's something on your clothes. Maybe a smell? But no, you're just the wrong child from the wrong house. You pick up the rope anyway, draw the bucket, and drink alone. The water is clean, but somehow you still feel unclean just for touching it. Reputation arrives before your voice ever does. You don't speak much in public. It wouldn't matter if you did. People hear your father in your silence. They see the axe in your shadow. Even adults who once smiled when you were born now glance away when you pass, a half second too late to seem natural. They nod with tight lips, pat your head with stiff hands, and then wipe their palms on their aprons as if guilt were contagious. At festivals, you are included, but only technically. You stand in the circle for games, but the rope never reaches you. You sit at the table for feasts, but no one passes the salt your way. You're not forbidden, just filtered. Your presence tolerated the way a bitter herb is added to soup. Necessary, perhaps, but no one wants a full spoon of it. You come home and ask your mother why no one will play with you. She pretends not to notice. She says they're just shy, as she braids your hair and keeps her back to you. Your father says nothing. He sharpens the blade. You stop asking. Sometimes in the quiet, you begin to wonder if it's something in you. Maybe you scowl without realizing. Maybe your voice is too low, your eyes too sharp. You watch yourself in puddles, adjusting your posture, forcing a smile that feels like someone else's face. But no matter what you change, the well always empties when you arrive. Children don't lie. They just inherit their parents' silence. One day, you're walking through the market, and someone yanks their child out of your path. It happens fast. A flicker of motion, a startled squeak, and the girl is clutched against her mother's skirt like you're a wolf stalking prey. You freeze. The woman doesn't look at you. She just says, "Not him," and keeps walking. You stand there with a small piece of bread in your hand, one you waited too long in line for. You drop it. The dirt takes it. So does a stray dog. That night, your father tells you that people will always fear what they don't understand. Then he corrects himself. Not fear. Avoid. There's a difference. You ask him which one you are. He answers by handing you a whetstone. Start with the edge, he says. Your house is quiet. Always. Not just because of shame or secrecy, but because noise doesn't change anything. The windows are narrow, the chairs uneven, the walls holding up more sorrow than timber. The blade rests on a hook by the hearth. Not hidden, but not flaunted either. You polish it like someone tending to a family heirloom. You don't think of it as a weapon. Not yet. It's a presence. A rule. A law made of metal. Your father keeps ledgers. Not many and not official, but they're there. Dates, names, times. You're not allowed to read them yet. But you sneak a glance once and see a name you recognize. A man who once gave you a sweet at the fair. You never see him again after a certain date. You never ask why. You already know. One evening, you hear shouting from outside. You peek through the shutter and see a man dragged through the mud, wrists bound, face bleeding. He's not crying. Not yet, but the fear is thick on him. The sheriff walks behind, silent, and two guards flank him like bookends made of anger. You know what it means. Not because anyone told you, but because it's always the same path, always the same timing. That night, your father lays out his tools like a priest setting the altar. The axe, a length of rope, a cloth soaked in something dark. He sharpens by firelight, face grim, hands steady. You sit across the room, pretending not to look. You listen to the scrape, scrape, scrape. Each stroke says, it's coming. Each spark says, get ready. You don't sleep well that night, but you don't cry. You've already learned what crying gets you. The next day, the town square is full. Baskets spill with vegetables, but no one buys. Chickens squawk from under arms, but no one quiets them. All eyes are forward toward the scaffold. You don't go. Children aren't supposed to. But you hear the bell. You feel the pause that comes before the crowd breathes in and holds it. You count to 5, then 6, then silence. Then life moves on, but it moves around your family. Not with it. That night, your father's hands smell like oil and iron. He doesn't speak at dinner. Neither do you. The stew is hot, but it tastes like nothing. Soon, the boys your age start teasing each other with names. Rat catcher, dumb boy, lazy thief. But no one dares call you anything. Not because they like you, because they don't want to be next. You're not a person to them. You're a symbol, a warning, a whispered bedtime threat. Be good or he'll come with his axe. They joke, except it doesn't feel like a joke. You grow strong without lifting weights. Your back straightens. Your stare deepens. And still, you are alone. The path to adulthood is paved with glances that never meet yours and questions you're not allowed to ask. One morning, you return to the well. It's early. Mist curls around the cobbles. And your boots are still damp with dew. A girl is there, the same one who was yanked away last time. She sees you and doesn't move. For a second, neither of you breathe. Then slowly, she steps aside, gives you space, and says nothing. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't run. It's not friendship, but it's something. A pause in the pattern. You draw your water, nod, and walk home. The bucket splashes your wrist. The cold is sharp, but not cruel. For once, no one spit after you passed. A small victory, but in your world, even a moment of stillness feels like a feast. The other children have dolls carved from driftwood, carts with squeaky wheels, or wool-stuffed animals that have been passed down so long they're practically siblings. You have a block of wood shaped vaguely like a head, a length of knotted rope, and a small hammer no one will admit was once used to set nails into a whipping post. You don't mind. You've never known anything else. You dangle the rope from your windowsill and make your toy puppets swing. Not for fun, for practice. Your father watches silently from the corner. He doesn't correct you, doesn't laugh. He just nods once, not approval, not pride. Just acknowledgement. That's the thing about your family. Nothing is celebrated, only confirmed. You're not playing executioner. You are one in miniature, like a blacksmith's son holding tiny tongs or a priest's daughter mimicking prayers. You're simply rehearsing the life you're bound to live. You build a tiny scaffold out of sticks and leftover firewood. It creaks when you set a lump of coal on top, but it holds. You've never seen a gallows up close, but you've seen enough outlines through fog to guess the angles. When the other children play castle and thief, no one asks you to join. But when you pass by, they all stop playing anyway. Your presence kills the game. One day, a boy laughs and dares another to lie on your wooden scaffold. Pretend you're a heretic, he says. The other boy freezes. You walk by without a word. The next time you return to that path, the scaffold is gone. Burned, probably. You never ask. You never expected it to last. Your room is small, just enough space for a straw bed, a sloped beam, and a few cloth bundles that hold clothes you'll outgrow before they're worn through. In the corner, under a sheet, is the axe your father retired. You know it's there. You've known since you were old enough to pull cloth from a hook. You peeked once, touched the blade with a fingertip. It was dull, cold, and smelled faintly of sweat and smoke. You asked your father once why he kept it. He said, "Every swing teaches something. That one taught me humility." He didn't elaborate. You didn't ask again. But sometimes, you look at it in the dark when the fire dies low, and you wonder what mistake dulled its edge. No one teaches you like a school teacher. No slats, no recitaciones. Your lessons come from proximity. From observation, you help your father oil leather straps, count iron nails, sharpen spare blades on quiet afternoons. Your handwriting is barely readable, but you can judge the weight of a hanging body just by the stretch of the rope. Your fingers are calloused from twisting hemp, not turning pages, and you already know how to read a face that's lying, which, in your world, is more useful than Latin. Once, a neighbor boy tried to throw a rock at your roof. It didn't hit, but it didn't need to. The next day, he avoided your gaze, and his father left a sack of onions on your doorstep without a word. That's how apologies are made here. Not through, "I'm sorry," but through root vegetables and quiet fear. Your toys grow heavier as you do. Rope becomes chain. Wood becomes steel. At 12, your father gives you a real blade, not the axe yet, but a short sword. Not for killing, he says, but for control. You learn how to grip it without trembling, how to adjust your stance to keep from tipping. He watches your feet more than your hands. The crowd only sees the arms, he mutters, but the feet do the real work. You train in the backyard, if you can call it that, a patch of hardened earth beyond the herb garden, out of sight from the road. You practice when the wind is loud, when the sun is low. No one wants to see you rehearse their future nightmares. So you keep it quiet, swift, controlled. Your mother doesn't say much about the training. She watches from windows, sometimes flinching, sometimes turning away. She still braids your hair, still kisses your forehead at night, still sets out soup with a sliver of meat tucked in like a reward. But her eyes say what her mouth won't. She knows what you're becoming. She's known since the midwife refused to touch your baptismal basin. Once she whispers that maybe you could move, maybe to another village, another town, but your father hears, and he shakes his head. "We're needed here," he says. "And where else would take us?" No one answers. You all know the truth. Executioners don't get to wander. They anchor on the edge of town, in the edge of thought. The first time you assist, it's not with a blade. It's with a card. A body, already limp, needs to be moved. Your father beckons, and you help lift. The man is heavier than you expected, still warm. You try not to look at his face, but you do, and it's not what you feared. No chatrith, no peace, just a mouth slightly open as if caught mid-breath. That night, your dreams are quiet, but your stomach is sour. You try to eat breakfast, but the bread turns to chalk in your mouth. Your father doesn't comment. He hands you a cloth. Clean the axe. He says, it doesn't care how you feel. And that, you realize, is the point. The blade doesn't care, but the village does. Too much, in fact, just not in your direction. The other boys your age are now apprenticing, one to a potter, another to the local stable. Their hands are dirty from clay or horse dung, and their backs ache from hauling. But they joke, they laugh, they shout at girls in the fields and steal fruit from markets for sport. You watch from a distance, not bitter, just separate. You tried joining them once, offering a jug of cider from your mother's cellar. They took it, said thanks, and didn't offer you a seat. You drank alone, 15 feet away, under the same tree. And when one boy burped loudly and the others laughed, you laughed too, but the sound didn't quite reach them. It wasn't cruelty, just habit, a boundary so old it became tradition. You don't resent your tools. You don't fear them. They are part of you now, like your hands, like your shadow. They speak without speaking. They promise order, not peace, but predictability. One clean swing, one single moment that spares the village from chaos. You learn to love the quiet before a job, the way the sky changes, the way the crows pause on the rooftops, the way the wind seems to hush itself. Not because the town demands reverence, but because even nature seems to recognize what's about to happen. And you, the child once feared at the well, are the center of that stillness. Not proud, not powerful, just necessary. You don't go to school, not the way the baker's boy does, reciting psalms and scratching Latin into wax tablets. Your lessons are older, messier, and far more useful in a world where mercy is rare and death needs an audience. Your father teaches you anatomy with a stick and a pig carcass. Same muscles, he says, prodding the shoulder. Different guilt. You nod. You're 12. You don't ask questions anymore. Instead of hymns, You memorize how much pressure it takes to break a joint. Instead of learning saints' names, you learn where the arteries lie. When you see a priest passing through town, you lower your head, not in reverence, but in practiced invisibility. The church wants your service, but never your presence. You're useful, but not sacred. Never sacred. They won't bury you in consecrated ground when your time comes. You already know that. Still, your fingers memorize the edge of the blade better than you'll ever memorize scripture. And when the wind shifts, you know if the air will carry the sound of a crowd before the gallows bell ever rings. Once, you sneak into the back of the church. Not during Mass, but late. When the candles are out and the floor still smells like old incense and damp wood. You sit where the others do. You fold your hands. Nothing happens. There's no thunderclap, no holy vision, no sudden words, just silence. Heavy, like a robe too big for your shoulders. You find a hymnal and try to read it aloud. Your voice feels small in the stone air. The words don't stick. They fall like snow, pretty but cold. You tuck the book back carefully. You want to believe something's up there, behind the rafters and carved saints and faded frescoes. But if it's watching, it isn't watching you. That's the first time you realize heaven might not have room for your kind. Your father has a book. Only one. Bound in leather, wrapped in cloth. Hidden behind a loose board under his bed. You find it one day when you're changing the linens. Inside are drawings, rough, sketched in ink. Anatomie diagramme, exécution technique. Lists of names crossed out with deliberate lines. There's a rhythm to it, a strange beauty. The same way a soldier might cherish his sword, your father has preserved his craft like scripture. One page is torn. Another has smudges where fingers lingered too long. At the back, a single phrase is written over and over again. One stroke. One truth. You don't know what it means yet, but it feels heavy, like a promise. Or a warning. You close the book and replace it. You never mention it, but you start writing your own. Most fathers teach their sons to fish or hunt, or stack wood without toppling it. Yours teaches you posture, balance, how to breathe from your diaphragm so your arms don't shake mid-swing, how to narrow your eyes not in anger, but calculation. He builds you a wooden post with a melon tied at the top. Pretend it's not a head, he says. Then hit like it is. The first time, you flinch. The second, you overcorrect. The third, you strike clean. Juice splatters your face. You wipe it with your sleeve. He nods once and walks away. That's the only praise you'll get. It's also the only praise you need. You realize something else then. The job isn't about strength. It's about control. One rainy afternoon, he tells you the story of his first execution. Not the act itself, but what came after. The man's wife waited until everyone left, he says. She came up, spat on the blood, and said she hoped I'd feel it every day I lived. You ask if he does. He pauses, then says, "Every day I breathe." You never ask again. There's a difference between killing and executing. A butcher kills. A knight kills. Even a robber kills. But you perform. The audience expects perfection. The law demands it. One stroke. Clean. Decisive. Mistakes aren't just embarrassing. They're haunting. A botched beheading becomes a tale told for generations. A hanging that doesn't break the neck instantly turns a sentence into suffering. You're not allowed to fail. And yet, every executioner eventually does. It's just a matter of when. Your father tells you stories of men who misjudged the swing, of those who trembled and missed the mark, of crowds that turned on the one meant to serve justice. They cheer until you slip, he says. Then they spit. You attend your first full execution at 15. Not in the shadows. Not beside the scaffold. On it. You don't swing. Not yet, but you hold the bucket. You steady the plank. You keep your hand steady even when the condemned sobs and begs. The crowd jeers. Some cheer. One man throws a crust of bread. It hits your boot. You don't move. When the head falls, you don't flinch. But inside, something rearranges, like a shelf tipped in the dark. You feel a cold settle in your ribs that never quite goes away. That night, you sharpen the axe without being asked. You don't sleep, but you don't tremble either. It's a beginning. Your name is no longer just yours. People don't say it like a greeting. They say it like a sentence. Don't cross him, he's that boy. His father's son. He's next. Girls avoid you. Not because of your face or your build, both are fine, but because your shadow carries ghosts. You ask a girl to walk with you once. She smiles, soft and kind. Then her mother pulls her away before she can answer. Later that week, the girl avoids your gaze. Not out of cruelty, out of protection. You stop asking. You begin to understand the rhythm of fear. How it arrives before you do. How it lingers after you leave. People lower their voices when you enter. They whisper louder after you've gone. The butcher wraps your meat faster. The blacksmith polishes your father's tools without charge. You are both feared and tolerated, like fire near hay. And yet, there's a strange kind of power in it. Not the joyful kind. Not the kind you'd wish on others. But certainty. People may not like you, but they remember you. You start walking straighter. You stop flinching when children run. Your father says little now, but when he does, it's with weight. The axe doesn't lie, he tells you, but it also doesn't forgive. He's older, slower, but his hands are still sure. You watch him more closely now for signs. You know the time is coming when you'll take his place. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. You don't fear it anymore. Not exactly, but sometimes when you're alone, sharpening the blade, you think of the torn page in his book, and you wonder what lesson you will learn the hard way. By the time you're 16, your footsteps make doors shut. They don't slam. That would imply emotion. No, they close quietly, respectfully, like shutters before a storm. Not because you've done anything, but because of what you represent. You become something the town both relies on and retreats from. They need you to be there, but never here. Not too close. Not at the market stall. Not at the dance. Not standing near their children. You walk through the center square, and the people part like water, shifting just enough to let you pass without brushing your cloak. The butcher no longer asks what cut you want. He just gives you the same piece every time. The priest nods, never speaks. The old woman who sells herbs spits on the cobbles after you're gone, muttering something you don't quite catch. But you catch the rhythm of it. Probably a curse. This isn't hatred. Hatred would require engagement. This is avoidance. A quiet, seamless ritual of erasure. You learn not to take it personally. That's one of the first real lessons of the job. Your father says, it's not you they hate. It's what you remind them of. Still, you notice the details. How no one ever walks behind you. How when you reach for a loaf of bread, the merchant suddenly finds something urgent to count beneath the stall. How at festivals, people move just enough so you're always on the edge of the circle, never quite in it. You don't blame them. Executioners don't blend in. You're not allowed to. Even if you wash your hands 100 times a day, they'd still see blood on them. It's not about what's real. It's about what people believe. One morning, a traveling bard sets up near the square fountain. He's young, bright-eyed, with a fiddle on his back and mud on his boots. The children gather quickly. Laughter rises in a way you haven't heard in weeks. You pause in the shadows, just listening. For a moment, it almost feels like any other life. Then the bard begins a song, something light and cheeky about a baker's daughter and a knight's mistake. The crowd giggles, until verse 3. That's when the story turns to the man with the axe who waits at dawn. His voice gets lower. The children's eyes grow wide. He pantomimes the swing. The crowd gasps, some laugh. Others don't. You leave before the song ends. Later that week, you see the bard again. He nods to you from across the road. He's smiling, politely, nervously. You say nothing, but you do notice he doesn't perform in the square anymore. From then on, his music stays behind the inn, where the only audience is travelers who don't know your name. This is how people learn, not through confrontation, through subtle shifts in behavior. One swing at a time. Your home sits just far enough from the village to feel like an afterthought, close enough to reach when needed, distant enough that no one visits without a reason. The path to your door is packed dirt, but no wagon tracks ever mark it. The fence leans at strange angles. The trees nearby grow crooked, as if bending away from your roof. It's not cursed, just marked. Your father always said a home like this is best. People remember us easier when we're not underfoot. You wonder sometimes if he believed that, or just repeated it until it sounded true. Inside, everything is kept clean, ordered, exact. The axe hangs above the mantel. Not displayed, not hidden, just present. A reminder that even here behind closed doors, the work never leaves. At night, you hear the village in echoes. Laughter, bells, distant songs. They float through your window, diluted by distance and wood smoke. Sometimes you sit outside just to listen. You never join in. You don't even try. You just let the noise wash over you. The way rain runs down the sides of a roof, touching everything, soaking nothing. Once, during a spring festival, you wander to the edge of town just to see the lights. Lanterns bob like fireflies strung from windows. Music spills out of the tavern door. You watch from the hill, unseen. A boy offers a girl a sweet. She laughs. You feel something twist in your chest. Not jealousy, not quite, just the ache of what you'll never ask for. You turn back before the song ends. Your clothes are always clean. Your boots are always polished. People assume your trade is bloody and filthy, but in truth, it's the opposite. Every gesture is careful. Every motion practiced. You learn to keep your collar crisp, your blade oiled, your posture steady. The cleaner you are, the less they look you in the eye. A paradox that suits you fine. Once, a nobleman's servant delivers payment late. You go to collect it yourself. He flinches when you appear at the door. "I wasn't expecting you," he says. You smile politely. "I expect everyone," you reply. He gives you the coin without further comment. It's the first time in days anyone touches your hand directly. You count the silver later. It's short. You don't correct it. One afternoon, a child gets lost in the woods beyond your cottage. You find her muddy, scared, tangled in bramble. She looks up at you and screams. You lift her gently. She kicks. You don't let go. You bring her back, carefully. At the edge of town, her mother sees you coming and pulls her close, shielding her like you're a wolf. The next day, you find a loaf of bread on your doorstep. Still warm. No note. You don't need one. You leave it there until it cools. You eat it quietly, with your back to the window. Small thanks. Silent. That's the only kind you ever receive. Sometimes, when you walk through the village, people still nod. A few brave ones even speak. "Morning," they say, or "cold today." Their voices crack slightly, like they're unsure if greeting you counts as blasphemy. You nod back, but never first. You learn the rules. You never enter the chapel. You never touch anyone in public. You stand at the edge of a crowd, never the center. You eat alone at feasts, drink alone at taverns, and walk home without needing to say goodbye. Your presence is like the tolling of a bell. Heard, acknowledged, but never embraced. You're not lonely. Not exactly. Loneliness implies something is missing. You've never had what others have. Community, welcome, ease, so you don't crave it. You have purpose, precision, a skill few understand, but everyone relies on. You're feared, yes, but also necessary. And in a strange way, that necessity becomes comfort. You don't need to be liked. You only need to be needed. And the village? Your home is neither shunned nor sacred, just strategically placed. The gallows stands in the center of town, towering over the square like a wooden reminder. But your cottage? It's pushed to the fringe. One crooked path away from the main road, one ditch shy of being forgotten. Close enough to be summoned, far enough to avoid casual visits. It's an arrangement the town never discusses aloud, but everyone accepts. The cottage itself is sturdy, if modest. Thatch roof, smoke-blackened beams, a door that groans on cold mornings. Inside, everything has a purpose. There's no clutter, no excess. Just your tools, your father's ledgers, your mother's careful stitching. The hearth is always clean, the blades always oiled. Even the walls seem to hold their breath. Because in this house, no one raises their voice. Even the air is trained to behave. And still, for all its silence and order, it's not a place you ever truly feel safe. Not because of ghosts, but because of memory. From your window, you can see the town, hazy and flickering through branches. You can tell when a wedding is happening. The bells ring higher, faster. You can hear the children playing near the chapel. And on some mornings when the fog is thin, you see the backs of people carrying baskets or pushing carts, walking away from your direction. No one walks toward you unless they have to. The sheriff comes twice a month with names. He doesn't knock. He leaves the parchment under a rock by the gate. Payment arrives later, sometimes in a satchel of coins, sometimes as livestock. Never as thanks. That's the rule. Everyone wants justice. No one wants to touch the hands that deliver it. The cottage creaks differently in winter. The wind pushes through the seams with a voice like someone muttering a story you're not supposed to hear. Your mother keeps herbs hanging in the beams to ward off what lingers. Your father doesn't believe in such things, but he lets her do it anyway. If it brings her peace, he says. You wonder what would bring him peace. You don't ask. The nights stretch longer this season. The hearth glows but doesn't warm. You sit with your tools, sharpening by firelight. Outside, the gallows looms like a memory made of timber. Sometimes, when the fire pops, it sounds like bone. And yet, you never flinch. This is your world. You've learned its rhythms. You live where most would rather forget. You once tried to raise chickens in the yard. It didn't go well. The neighbors refused to buy the eggs. Bad luck, they said, even after you ate a dozen yourself and lived to tell the tale. The rumors stuck. Eventually, the hens were stolen or ran away. You're not sure. You didn't chase them. You figured they knew better. You grow your own vegetables instead. Quiet things, root crops, mostly turnips, onions, the kind of food that lives underground and doesn't ask for light. You tell yourself it suits you, and it does. The soil is better here, strangely. No one knows why. You do. Blood runs downhill. There's a small shed beside the house. No one asks what's inside. If they did, you'd tell them rope, tar, old boards, and rusted chains that haven't been used in years. A spare block, roughly carved, rests in the corner. You sharpen it now, and then, more out of habit than need. Your father once called it the guest room. He wasn't joking, but he wasn't smiling either. That's the thing with him. His jokes come dressed in truth. Once, during a storm, lightning struck just beyond the cottage, splitting a tree near the old well. You watched it happen, bright, instant, violent. The next morning, the tree was gone. Cleanup crew from the village. No one asked if you needed help, but someone did leave a bundle of firewood near your porch. No note, just the smell of ash. You accepted it without thanks. That's how these things work. You remember the day a messenger from the bishop's court came. He was clean, perfumed, wearing more rings than fingers should need. He didn't enter your home. Stood outside. Nose wrinkled like the air offended him. He told your father there would be a special sentencing. In 3 days, a noble condemned not by town law, but by church judgment. Your father nodded. Asked no questions, closed the door without a bow. Inside, he said nothing for a while. Just sat by the fire, unmoving. Then, nobles die harder. Not their necks, their pride. You wrote that down in your own little book. You're keeping one now, just like his. A ledger of lessons. A quiet inheritance. Your mother plants wildflowers near the fence. She says it's good for the bees. You know better. She's trying to make the place look soft. Less like a sentence, more like a home. It works a little. When they bloom, the path feels gentler. Even the birds seem less cautious. But once the petals fall and the stalks brown, everything looks harsher again. The illusion fades like a morning dream. She doesn't replant. She just lets things grow where they will. Some years the poppies return. Some years, nothing. You never ask if she notices. You both do, but some things aren't for talking about. One night, you find yourself standing outside the house, looking up at the sky. It's clear, moon like a coin, stars like scattered crumbs. The kind of sky that poets might write about. You've read some poetry, stolen from the manor library when you had a delivery job there once. It all talks of beauty, of freedom, of longing. But standing here beside your house, beside your axe, beside a life you didn't choose, you don't feel longing. You feel placed, like a stone on a board. Not meant to move, just to be here. And somehow, that's enough. The gallows creak even when empty. It's the wind, or maybe memory. The wood remembers what it's for. Some nights, you swear it groans like it's tired of holding up judgment. Like it too would like to retire. You've oiled its joints, replaced the boards. You take care of it like a craftsman does his bench. Not out of pride, out of respect. For the weight, for the purpose. You wonder if your father hears it too, late at night. He never says, but sometimes you hear his breathing change when the wind howls through the beams. There's a moment that returns to you often, the one where you walked home from sentencing alone. The crowd didn't follow. No yelling, no noise, just silence. Your boots echoed. The road was empty, and the cottage sat waiting like it always had. You remember thinking, this is it. This is all it will ever be. Not with bitterness. With certainty. It happens slowly, like moss on stone, the way you begin to notice her. Not because of grand gestures or stolen glances. Just because, for once, someone doesn't flinch. She's the daughter of a tanner. Always smells faintly of ash and animal hide. Strong arms, quick steps, voice like water over gravel. The first time she passes you in the lane, she nods. Not with fear, not with pity, just acknowledgement. Like she sees you, not what you do, not what people whisper, but you. You carry that nod for days. Replay it like a hymn. You don't tell your father. Your mother notices your pacing. You're polishing the blade too much, she says. You don't answer. There's no guidebook for this part. Executioners don't get chapters about love. And yet, something stirs. Not loudly, but undeniably. You start going to the market more than necessary. Buying things you already have, salt, thread, kindling. She's there often, bartering with butchers, laughing with vendors who don't seem to mind the stink of tannin on her sleeves. She sees you, nods again, once even smiles. It's not much, but in your world, that's everything. You consider speaking. You rehearse lines. Nothing clever, just hello, maybe how's your father. But when the moment comes, your tongue dries. You nod. She nods. The dance continues. Slow, careful, like two people meeting on a bridge that could collapse at any second. One day, she walks beside you for a stretch, says something about the weather. You reply. It's the longest conversation you've had in weeks. You replay every word that night, as if they were vows. Your father notices. Not directly, just a raised eyebrow when you come home later than usual. Your mother doesn't ask, but she leaves extra stew in the pot, just in case. You sit by the fire, hands still smelling faintly of her ash. Wool skin. You don't smile, but something in your chest softens. There's no courting, not officially. No exchanging of ribbons or passing of love notes. People like you don't get to woo. You sneak moments. Fragments. You walk the long way to the well because she might be there. You carry firewood for her when no one's looking. Once, she touches your wrist, just lightly, just once. And for a whole hour afterward, your hand refuses to do anything violent. You dream of a life beyond the scaffold. Just briefly. A cottage by the river. A market stall selling cured meats. Maybe children who don't carry your shadow. But then the bell rings one morning and you're reminded. The axe is still yours. The names still arrive. The world doesn't care who you kiss. You don't see her for a week. Then another. You assume it's over. That someone warned her off. Maybe the priest. Maybe her father. Maybe her own sense of survival. And you don't blame her. You wouldn't choose you either. But just as you begin to bury it, she returns. Finds you sharpening your blade behind the house. Doesn't flinch. Doesn't ask what it's for. Just sits nearby and hands you a piece of bread. Figured you'd forgotten to eat, she says. You don't speak for a long while. You just eat and breathe. She becomes a constant, not daily, but steady. You don't call it love. That word doesn't live easily in your mouth. But it's something. And in your life, something is more than enough. You meet her in shadowed corners. Behind the shed, under the trees. You don't kiss often. It feels too sacred, too exposed. But when you do, it's with the silence of people who've waited too long for softness. Her hands are rougher than yours. You like that. Once, she tells you she thought you'd be colder. Not mean, she says. Just shut off. You shrug. Maybe I was, you reply. She leans her head against your shoulder. You aren't now. And for a brief moment, you believe it. You make her a gift, a comb carved from bone. Not from a victim, not from a job. From a deer you found dead in the woods. You polished it for hours, added tiny flowers along the edge. She accepts it like it's gold, wears it in her hair even when walking past the sheriff's house. That night, you almost cry, not from sadness, from disbelief. The next day, The sheriff eyes you longer than usual, but says nothing. Your mother finds out. She doesn't scold. She just asks, "Will you bring her here someday?" You don't answer, but you imagine it. The three of you sitting quietly, maybe laughing, maybe even baking. A future so fragile it feels like touching it would break it. But the village notices. Whispers begin. You're no longer just the executioner's son. You're involved. And people hate being reminded that you're human, that you have a heart, that someone might love you despite everything. One morning, someone throws a dead rat at your door. No note, just a message. The next day, her father stops selling to certain customers. His trade suffers. You see him drinking more. She doesn't leave. Not yet, but her eyes grow harder. You both know what's coming. Not because you're weak, but because this world makes kindness expensive. She comes to you one final night. Doesn't speak much. Just takes your hand. Places something in it. A small ribbon, blue, frayed at the edge. "Keep this," she says. You try to protest. She shakes her head. "You'll need it more than me." You walk her to the edge of the path. She doesn't look back. You don't watch her leave. You go inside. Sit by the fire. Open your ledger. You don't write a name. Just a date. A memory. The ribbon goes in the drawer with the polishing cloth. It still smells like her for days. And after that, silence. No one mentions her. No one asks. Life folds back into its routine like a wound healing without a scar. But every now and then, you pass a woman in the market, strong arms, fast steps, a flash of blue in her apron, and your breath catches. And you remember, some things are too human for this life. Some love's too soft for iron hands. But you had it, briefly, enough to prove you weren't born made of stone. And that's more than most ever get. You never intended to pass it down. The trade, the silence, the distance. You thought you could be the last. That maybe, just maybe, it would end with you. But life doesn't work that way, not here. The law always needs a hand to swing. And the world, ever forgetful, still needs someone to take the blame. So when your child is born, the village doesn't ask questions. They nod tight-lipped, like the cycle has resumed. No priest blesses the cradle. The midwife doesn't touch the baby longer than necessary. The neighbor's wife leaves a jar of honey at your door, but never follows up. You cradle the child, small, warm, blinking up at you, and feel both awe and a terrible sadness. You whisper a promise. It won't be like it was for me. But even as you say it, you know, that's a vow the world won't let you keep. The child grows, slowly, beautifully, and for a while, things are quiet. No one says anything. The sheriff doesn't visit. The town avoids your road. But they've always done that. For a few years, you almost feel normal. The child laughs, plays with sticks, pets the neighbor's goat when no one's looking. But the glances return, subtle as frost. The baker who once handed you an extra roll now avoids your eyes when you bring the child into town. A girl at the well whispers something cruel, not to your child, but about them. It's enough. That night, you sit by the fire, polishing steel you haven't touched in weeks. Your hands remember. Your mind does not. You realize, slowly, that silence has a shape, and your child is beginning to wear it. You try to shield them. You raise your voice in defense once, in the square when a group of boys throws mud at their feet. The silence afterward is louder than the insult. No one says anything, but the message is received. The next time you visit town, the blacksmith overcharges you. The seamstress says she's too busy. The schoolmaster declines to teach your child, saying they might distract the others. So you teach them yourself. In the cottage, quietly, carefully, letters carved into wood, numbers counted with river stones. You try to fill their world with things that aren't death. Stories, jokes, warm meals, but even laughter echoes differently in a house that holds the axe. One morning, your child asks about the blade above the mantel. You pretend not to hear. They ask again, louder this time. You still don't answer. That night, they draw a picture, not of animals or flowers like before, but of a tall figure holding a curved shape in one hand. You don't scold. You just sit with it. You feel something in your chest sag, like an old beam under too much weight. You don't sleep well. You haven't in years. But tonight, you keep the fire going as if its light might stop the future from arriving. Eventually, the sheriff returns, not with a parchment this time, with words, a request, a name. You're needed, he says, standing outside your fence, not stepping in. It's been too long. You tell him no. He waits, then places a coin pouch on a post and walks away. The next day, the butcher greets you. First time in months. The day after, a boy at the well nods politely to your child. Not warmly, just politely. That's how it begins again. Not with a blade, but with acceptance by omission. You know how the town works. Service equals silence. Silence earns space. It's not a life, but it's a kind of peace. Your child grows stronger, wiser. They begin to ask the questions you once did. Why we live here? Why no one visits? Why their name is spoken only behind doors? You don't lie, but you don't tell the whole truth either. We do what others can't, you say. We carry what they're afraid of. One night, you find them practicing with a stick in the yard, mimicking your old forms. You watch from the window. They strike true. You feel pride and guilt, equal and opposite. You wonder if your father felt the same. Your partner, patient, worn, still beside you after all these years, tries to hold the child to gentler paths. They teach cooking, sewing, laughter, but even they can't scrub away the quiet. The child knows. They always know. Blood doesn't stain the soul, maybe, but it does mark it. Like smoke on clothes. It lingers. You argue once softly. Your partner says, we could leave. Try another town. You shake your head. It follows. They know you're right. You both fall silent. You both carry it. Later, your child places a wildflower on the axe handle. You leave it there. It withers. You still don't move it. Time passes. The cottage grows older. You repair the door more often. Your knees ache in winter, but the gallows still stands. And when your hand falters, the town begins looking at your child differently. Not with disdain, but with expectation. And your child? They begin to walk straighter. They notice how the rope coils, how the wood flexes. You don't teach these things anymore. You don't have to. Some knowledge is inherited in silence. Like language, like fear. One day, you come home and find the axe freshly polished. You hadn't touched it in weeks. You say nothing. They don't look up, but they've already taken your place. You were just a bridge. At night, you sit by the fire with your ledger. You flip through names, dates, quiet memories written in tight ink. You find the first name you ever wrote, and the last. Then close the book, not out of ceremony, just because you know the next page is no longer yours to fill. Your child sits across from you, fletching arrows. Not for hunting, just to understand how force travels through weight. You ask what they dream of. They say nothing, but you see their hand clench around the shaft. You nod. You remember that silence too. You make one final attempt to steer them away. Offer to send them to study elsewhere, anywhere. They decline. This is ours, they say. It's ugly, but it matters. You want to argue, but your words fail, because deep down, you know they're right. You helped build this life, brick by brick, blow by blow. You shaped it, and now they're inside it. The axe passes hands. Not with the church bells ring each morning, calling others to kneel. You hear them always, but you don't go. Not because you don't believe. In fact, sometimes you believe too much. But the pews are not for people like you. You walk past the chapel in silence, eyes lowered, as if the stones themselves might judge. The priest never says your name. The villagers never invite you to weddings or baptisms. And when death comes, not the kind you deliver, but the kind that takes in silence. Your family is buried outside the walls. You asked once, when you were still young, why you couldn't sit beside the others. Your father just said, because we touch the end, and they don't want death whispering in their prayers. And so, you stopped asking. God might listen, but his house has rules. You still pray, though, quietly, not in Latin, not with beads, but with gestures, steady breath before a swing, a muttered plea that it be clean. You pray when you wash the blade, when you walk the condemned to their place, when the silence after is too long, too deep, too empty. You wonder if that counts. If God accepts prayers done in blood. You hope so. You have to. You've read the scripture, though it was never offered to you. The parts about judgment, mercy, wrath. You remember one line best. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Sometimes you wonder if he outsourced the paperwork. The law, on the other hand, knows exactly who you are. The sheriff visits with names. The magistrate pays in coin or favors. The town council thanks you, quietly, when no one's listening. You have a role, clear and defined. Not noble, not blessed, but necessary. You're bound to the law in a way priests never are. They speak of sin. You remove it. They debate guilt. You carry out the answer. There's no room for theology on the scaffold. Just breath, steel, and gravity. You've come to trust the law more than faith. It may be flawed, biased, cruel, but at least it admits what it is. Still, you remember your first public exclusion, the moment you understood fully. You were a boy, just 12, and the town held a procession for St. Michael's Day. Everyone wore white. The streets were strewn with petals. Children carried candles. You waited, dressed and ready by the edge of the square. When the line approached, the priest looked at you and shook his head. Just slightly. No words. Just that small, sharp denial. You stepped back, watched the procession pass like a ghost on the edge of a dream. No one said anything after. Your parents didn't speak of it. The next day, life resumed, but something inside you didn't. Over time, you built your own rituals, small moments of sacredness, not blessed by Rome, but meaningful nonetheless. You light a single candle before a sentence. You polish the axe in silence the night before. You clean your boots with rosemary water before walking to the square. Your chapel is the early morning mist. Your altar is the block. Your communion is the breath before the fall. No one sees, but you know, and that is enough. One year, a priest from another province comes through. Young, fresh-faced, eager. He stops at your door unannounced, asking to speak about your soul. You stare at him for a full 10 seconds before inviting him inside. Your partner raises an eyebrow. Your child stays silent in the corner. He speaks for 15 minutes, quoting scripture. Tells you no one is beyond redemption. Tells you even Judas could have been forgiven. Then asks if you've considered confession. You don't laugh. You simply say, "Confession is for things I regret. I don't regret protecting order." He leaves a pamphlet. You burn it before sunset. You've heard the rumors, of course, that some priests secretly bless the condemned before you arrive. That a few whisper forgiveness over their heads just before the swing. You don't stop them. You don't ask. If it brings peace to the dying, so be it. But you never ask for the same blessing. Not because you think you're damned, but because you know better than to pretend the church would ever say yes. You are justice's shadow, not heaven's servant. Your absolution, if it comes, will not be spoken aloud. Still, you sometimes look up at the sky before a job and wonder, are you watching? And if so, do you understand? Your partner still goes to chapel. Not often, but sometimes. They sit near the back. No one speaks to them directly, but no one moves away either. A quiet form of tolerance. The priest never looks in their direction. Once, they return home with ash smudged on their brow. You say nothing, but you watch the mark as they stir the stew. It fades slowly. You wonder how many sins it covered. You tell yourself it's good, but they still believe. Someone in the house should. Your child asks one night why people whisper unclean when they walk past. You want to say it's superstition, fear, cowardice, but instead, you tell the truth. Because we do what they pray they'll never have to see. Your child doesn't cry, doesn't ask further. They just sit beside you and stare at the blade resting by the hearth. You reach over, sharpen a notch you hadn't noticed. The sound fills the silence. It's the only hymn this house still sings. One day, you pass by the chapel and see a burial procession. Small, solemn, slow. The bells ring. The villagers gather. The coffin is lifted. You know the family. You did not know the man was dying. You stand respectfully at a distance. You do not join. You do not speak. You remove your cap. That's all. And yet, someone from the procession turns, looks, frowns, and subtly shifts their position so you're no longer in their line of sight. You feel like a slap. You walk home and say nothing. You've come to understand that faith is not about being seen. It's about surviving silence, about continuing to believe that somewhere, beyond the judgments and shadows, There is a place where truth exists without shame. You'll never see it here. Not in the village, not in the chapel, but maybe one day in the dark beyond. Until then, you serve the only altar that ever opened its doors to you. The law. It doesn't love you. It doesn't forgive you, but at least it lets you in. You've always known that a single stroke must end it. Not just because it's cleaner, not just for dignity, but because a second swing changes everything. The moment the axe rises a second time, it stops being justice and starts becoming cruelty. And the crowd knows that. They don't say it. They never do. But you feel in the air that sharp collective breath when the first blow falls, and whether it ends there or not. You've never missed. Not yet. The blade has always done its part. You keep it sharper than your own thoughts. Your hands move by instinct now. Every gesture muscle taught over years. No wasted effort. No teatrics. Just weight and momentum, time like breath. But you've seen others fail. Journeymen from other towns, aging men with tremors they try to hide, apprentices shoved into duty too soon. You've seen them falter, and you've seen what follows. The gasps, the screams, the cries of butcher, the thrown stones, the curses spat at their feet. No one remembers clean deaths, only the messy ones. The condemned rarely make it easy. Some weep, some curse, some try to joke, as if humor might delay fate. One man told you to swing fast because his mother was in the crowd. Another said he hoped his blood would stain your dreams. You don't answer. You never do. The last thing most of them see is your face, and you've learned to keep it neutral. Not cold, just unreadable. Like stone, you wear a hood, sometimes. Not always. Depends on the crime, on the crowd, on the mood. The hood doesn't hide you. Everyone knows who you are. It just makes it easier for them to pretend this is something less personal. Like a story, a play, a necessary illusion, and you let them have it. There's always a moment just before, when the platform creaks and the crowd goes still, and the condemned takes their final breath, that your own body seems to float. Not weightless, just distant, like your soul steps aside, watching the swing from a few feet away. It's not fear, not anymore. It's clarity. Focus so sharp it borders on numbness. The axe rises. Your foot shifts. The breath comes in. Then it ends. And for a beat, the whole world holds its breath with you. You've studied it. The perfect angle. The ideal timing. You know exactly how high to raise the blade, how to balance your weight through the knees, how to shift your shoulders at the last second to let gravity finish the job. You've measured necks by eye, assessed vertebrae through clothing. You've cut through muscle like a farmer through wheat. It's not art, but it's not savagery either. It's craft, a job, and jobs must be done right. Especially this one. Your tools are fewer than people imagine. Just the axe, a whetstone, a small cloth, and the block. No hooks, no whiz. Those are for other men in darker towns. Here, it's still about tradition, about speed, cleanliness, dignity, as strange as that sounds. You keep the blade wrapped in oil-soaked cloth when it's not in use. The wood handle you sand by hand once a week. Your father once told you the moment you neglect your tools is the moment they betray you. You've never forgotten that. Every nick on the edge tells a story. Every scar on your gloves reminds you what you carry. Once, years ago, you saw a man need 3 strikes. You weren't the one swinging. It was a traveling executioner, older. His hands already shaking before the bell rang. The first blow missed the spine. The second hit bone and bounced. The third finished it, but by then, the crowd was howling. That executioner never worked again. You heard he died a year later. Alone. Unpaid. You never spoke to him, but you think of him often. In your darker dreams. When your hand trembles, even just slightly from cold or age. You whisper his name like a warning. The townspeople never speak of the executions after they happen. No one recites the crimes. No one asks about the details. They just move on. You become invisible again. That's how it works. You're summoned when needed, forgotten when not. But you see the way their eyes linger just a moment longer the next day. The way shopkeepers avoid handing you change directly. The way parents steer children away from you, even as they whisper that you're why they sleep safe at night. It's strange, being needed and avoided in the same breath. But you stop being surprised. Your child watches you now from the shadows near the cottage. You never asked them to, but they're always there, quiet, steady, observing like you once did. You see the questions in their eyes, the weight of what's coming, and you wonder, will they flinch? With their hand on the handle? Will they tremble the first time? Will they miss? You hope not, but you remember how hard the first swing was. Not physically, spiritually. The moment your body agrees to do what your soul still resists. Afterward, you told no one, not even your father. You just sat by the fire that night and scrubbed your hands until the skin reddened. Even though you wore gloves, even though no blood touched you. It's the memory that stains. There's no celebration when it's done right. No applause, no good work, just silence. Maybe a small coin purse, maybe nothing at all. You return home, hang up your coat, wipe your boots, and sit. The swing becomes part of you. Not a scar, not a wound, a groove, something worn smooth from repetition. Your partner never asks details. They simply set a plate on the table. Hot food, quiet hands, a flicker of shared understanding. It's the closest thing to grace you've ever known. You've learned to read the crowd, too. Their shifting moods, their expectations. Some want a spectacle, some want solemnity, some want closure. You give them all the same thing, precision. You let the crowd always leaves before the real work begins. They come for the sentence, stay for the swing, then vanish, like smoke after fire, like a bad dream that forgets itself. You hear their feet trailing off into the alleys. You see the children whispering, daring each other to peek again, then running off shrieking into the safe brightness of noon. They don't stay for what comes next. No one does. The block is still wet. Blood pools slowly where the head fell. The straw scattered for mercy is never enough. It clumps, soaks, sticks to your boots. You lift the body. It's heavier now than it was alive. Something about death makes a man denser, like it pulls all his weight downward into the earth. And that weight? That's yours to carry. No applause. No coin for this part. Just the cleanup. The reset. The task no one speaks of, but everyone expects. You drag the body to the cart. Not gently, but not cruelly. It's not about the man anymore. It's about finishing the job. You learned long ago not to look at the face, especially if the eyes are still open. You used to close them. Now you don't. Not out of coldness, out of discipline, out of the knowledge that mercy is measured in swings, not gestures. The head goes in a separate cloth sack. It's not morbid. It's just logistics. You keep the two apart until the burial or display, depending on the sentence. Sometimes justice demands a head on a spike. Other times, a quiet hole in the woods. You don't question it. You don't protest. You just carry the tools and do what the paper says. There are rumors, of course, that you eat with blood still on your boots, that you keep fingers in jars, that your cottage smells like rot. None of it's true. In fact, your home is cleaner than most taverns. But truth matters less than myth. And people would rather believe you live in filth than admit that they handed you the work they couldn't bear to watch. Sometimes, you clean the block with lavender water. Not because anyone notices, but because the scent lingers longer than the stain. It feels like a gesture, not forgiveness, not healing, just something gentle left behind after something hard. You tried burning sage once. The smoke made your child cough. You never did it again. The cart itself is old. Iron wheels, creaky joints built by your grandfather or maybe his. You replace the bolts yourself every few seasons. You sand the handles when they splinter. People don't see it as part of your trade, but it is. That cart is your altar, your delivery, your ritual. You park it behind the scaffold while you work, never in full view. The town pretends it's not there, but they always glance at it, just once as they leave, like checking that the nightmare really is over. Once, during winter, the wheels froze to the mud. You had to use a crowbar to free them, while the wind howled and the corpse stiffened by the second. That was the same night your gloves tore. You worked barehanded. You didn't feel your fingertips again until morning. Burials happened far from the chapel, behind the hedge, near the edge of the woods, where the ground is shallow and the priest's shadow never falls. You dig with purpose, never haste. The soil there is stubborn. You've broken 3 shovels over the years. Sometimes there's a marker. Sometimes not even a name. You know more unmarked graves than anyone in town. You could map them in your sleep. In a strange way, they're your quiet congregation. They never complain, never ask why. They just remain. You once tried to say a prayer over a man who wept before he died. Your voice cracked. You never tried again. There's always laundry afterward. Tunic, gloves, apron. All soaked, stiff with what justice leaves behind. Your partner boils the water without comment. Adds lie. Scrubs until her knuckles go raw. You offer to help. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't. The child knows not to ask what happened. But they see the steam. They smell the iron tang. They know which bucket holds the shirts you wear on scaffold days. You try to hide it when they were younger. Now, there's no point. The house breathes it. The hearth remembers. Your hands never stop smelling of it, no matter how much you scrub. Even when you use lemon peel or vinegar. Even when you soak them in salt water till your skin puckers. It's ingrained now, in the cracks of your nails. You could touch holy water and it would still cling. Once you passed by a child who wrinkled their nose and said, "He smells like rust." The mother shushed them, but didn't deny it. You keep your hands to yourself now, even at home. The records are kept in a ledger, not for pride, for memory. Each name entered with care. Date, crime, sentence, result. You never editorialize. Never add notes like seemed afraid or fought to the end. Just facts. Clean. Cold. Your father's handwriting fades in the earlier pages. Yours takes over halfway through. Your child has begun adding small tick marks, learning the method. The pen shakes slightly, but steadies by the 3rd entry. It's not a family tree, but it is inheritance. Once, a magistrate visited and requested an entertainment hanging. A thief from another town, meant to make an example. Nothing messy, he said, but dramatic. You said no. He insisted. You refused again. That night, your cart was tipped over. No one claimed it, but you knew. The message was clear. Stay in your place. You fixed the wheels by morning, cleaned the blood, and said nothing. People forget that even when the crowd has gone, you're still there. Sweeping, scrubbing, shoveling, lifting, alone with the end they ordered but didn't want to witness in full. It's not glory. It's not power. It's process. And you perform it like a liturgy. Without applause. Without complaint. Because the cost of justice isn't just blood. It's the hands that carry it away. Payment always arrives the same way. Quiet, swift, impersonal. A pouch of coins left on a doorstep. Sometimes in a basket of bread or wrapped in cloth like contraband. Never by hand. No one ever knocks. No one ever says thank you. The coins clink like gilt. Silver mostly. Sometimes copper if the town's short on generosity. You never count it in public. You never ask for more. It's enough. Not generous, but enough. Enough to keep the roof dry, the boots repaired, the axe sharp. Enough to buy meat without waiting for scraps. Enough to stay useful, but never admired. People say justice should be blind, and apparently poor eyesight comes with the salary, too. You joke about that once. To yourself. Then not again. Because the truth is, the coins are stained before they even touch your hands. Not visibly, but you feel it. You tried spending one of the payments once at the inn. Just a drink, a bit of bread, a stool by the hearth. You even sat by the door, as if ready to leave quickly. You didn't expect conversation, just quiet. The barkeep poured you ale without meeting your eye, set on the table like you might bite. The room hushed slightly, as it always did. People didn't leave, not yet, but their laughter dimmed. The warmth pulled inward. The ale was good, cold, clean, with a hint of honey. You sipped it slowly, watching the fire. You didn't expect comfort, but for a few minutes, you let yourself imagine being just another man with aching hands. Then the man beside you stood. Didn't look your way, just left. So did another, then a third. The barkeep came back. Quiet voice. "Maybe it's best, sir. For tonight." You left the coin. Didn't take the change. After that, you drank at home. You always kept a cask in a corner, tapped slowly, rationed like sugar in winter. Not out of poverty, out of preference. Because drinking alone, at least, came with no performance. No silence thicker than the brew. No glances that slid away like oil on water. You drink beside the fire, blade across your knees, ledger open nearby. Sometimes your partner joined, sometimes not. Your child never asked for a sip. You never offered. Some inherit enough without tasting it. One winter, you drank too much after a triple execution. The axe slipped when you tried to clean it. Cut your palm deep. Your partner wrapped it without a word. You didn't drink for a month. The market sellers know your coins by weight. They never refuse them, but they handle them like hot coals. Set them in separate pouches. One man, a butcher, blesses the coin before slipping it into his apron. You once caught a seamstress spitting on the ground after accepting your payment. You never say anything, never argue. You just nod. Maybe you even understand. They don't mind using your service, but they prefer your coins didn't remember. You consider melting them down once, scrubbing them clean, but that doesn't erase what paid for them. So you carry the weight. Quietly, you once asked the sheriff why the pay hadn't changed in years, even as the cost of flour and meat rose. He looked surprised, not that you asked, but that you expected an answer. It's not about what you're worth, he said. It's about what they're willing to admit they need. That night, you wrote that in your ledger, underlined it twice, then poured yourself a drink. Didn't even wait for it to settle. Because he was right. Money buys things. Repairs, tools, extra wool in the winter. But never buys place. You don't get invited to gatherings. No one seeks your advice at council. No children bring flowers to your door on holy days. Once, your child asked why you paid the same taxes as the baker, but weren't allowed to join the harvest feast. You didn't know how to answer, so you just stared into your cup and said, because bread fills stomachs, justice fills silence. They didn't understand. You hope they never fully do. You've considered saving up to leave. Really leaving. Far away. A new town. A new name. Maybe a cottage near the sea where no one knows your face. You've done the math. The coin would stretch if you live small. But where would you go? The moment someone asks what you used to do, the silence would return. The glance. The shift in tone. There's no outrunning what you've done. Not when what you've done is needed. You think of that place often. Not as a plan. Just as a dream. Like a painting someone described to you once, but you've never seen for yourself. Your partner manages the household money. Always has. They stretch it like magic, turning a small pouch into warmth, into comfort, into something almost like normalcy. They're good at it. Not just because they must be, because they've had to be. You once asked how they feel living off coin earned in blood. They looked at you calm and said, I'd rather live beside the man who earns it than die under the boots of the ones who make it necessary. You didn't reply. You just kissed their palm. That was enough. The town builds a new tavern once. Larger, fancier, with music and brighter ale. You're never invited to the opening. Of course not. You pass by one evening just to see. Through the window, warmth spills like golden syrup. Laughter, fiddles, two lovers kissing. A man dancing with flowers still on his sleeves. You stand outside for a while, long enough for the barkeep to notice. He meets your eyes, then looks away. You walk home, open your own cask, pour a single cup. You toast the quiet. You drink it slowly. Blood money spends the same as any other. That's the town's secret. They won't hold your hand, but they'll take your coin. They won't meet your eye, but they'll sleep better knowing you're nearby. You aren't poor, but you'll never be rich in the ways that matter here. You can fix a roof, buy a meal, replace a wheel. But you can't buy a seat at their table. And maybe that's the cruelest part. Not the labor, not the blood, but the fact that you're never quite allowed to forget what it cost. Everyone knows who you are. They whisper it when they think you've passed, nod vaguely in your direction without ever daring to speak your name aloud. It's not that they don't know it. It's that to say it would make you real. And real people bleed. Real people feel. It's easier for them if you're just the headsman. The axe. Him. It becomes strange, living with a name you rarely hear. It still exists on the town records, in ledgers and documents. You've even seen it etched carefully onto your father's gravestone. But in the mouths of others, it withers. Fades. You're known only by what you do, never by who you are. You become your function, a walking verdict in leather boots. Once, you overheard a child ask her mother, "What's his name?" The woman just said, "It doesn't matter. He's the one who makes bad people go away. The girl nodded. That was enough. You kept walking. Slowly. Quietly. But your name burned in your chest the rest of the day. Even the sheriff avoids using it. When he visits, he starts with, "You'll be needed again." No good day. No hello. Just business. You've stopped correcting him. What would be the point? He knows your name. But to use it would imply connection, familiarity. And no one wants to be familiar with the executioner. Not even the law. On rare occasions, your name appears in official records, payment notes, council rolls. But it's always at the bottom. Always in small print. The butcher's boy gets listed higher than you. The man who sharpens horseshoes gets more mention in town meetings than you. The one who swings the blade that keeps order. You are essential, but not visible. A paradox dressed in black. Your child says your name often. That's what keeps it alive. When they call you from the yard, when they whisper good night, when they ask questions only you can answer. It always softens you. Reminds you that there is still a person under the title, still a man beneath the leather apron. But even they're starting to understand how the world works. The last time they used your name in town, just in passing, while pointing to you from across the square, a merchant's wife flinched. Not because it was loud, just because it was. That night, your child asked, "Should I stop calling you that in front of them?" You wanted to say no. You wanted to say never. Instead, you said, "Only if you want peace." You remember your father's voice. How he'd say your name once a week, usually on scaffold days, when he needed to know you were steady. It was like a torch passed between breaths. You never realized how rare that sound was until he was gone. You said it more times since his death than you heard it while he lived. His name lives in the ledger now, carved beside yours in fading ink, one on top of the other. The same handwriting, different lines. You wonder if he struggled with the same silence. If he walked through town and felt like a ghost. You never asked. Neither of you were raised for questions like that. There's a strange dignity in being unspoken, a kind of terrible freedom. No one expects warmth from you. No one demands conversation. Your presence alone is enough to clear space. Sometimes you think you could walk into a fire, and no one would say your name to call you out. You once thought of carving it into wood, just once, and setting it on the gallows post. Not for attention, just to remind them. I'm not just the axe. I'm the one holding it. You never did. The gesture felt too large, too loud. Instead, you whispered it under your breath the next time you struck. Just for yourself. There are towns where the executioner wears a mask. Not just a hood, a full mask. Painted, leather, expressionless. You've heard it makes the process easier for the crowd. No face, no man, just justice made flesh. Here, you wear your own face. Scarred, weathered, familiar to some, feared by most. You wonder sometimes if a mask will be kinder, not for you but for them. If not seeing your eyes would help them sleep better after the sentence is passed. But then again, maybe that's the point. Maybe they should remember. Maybe forgetting the face is what leads to needing the blade so often. You've never decided which is better, being invisible or unforgettable. One winter night, deep into the season where the snow comes early and the roofs groan under its weight, you help a woman whose cart is broken on the road. No one else is around. You lift the wheel, brace the axle, tighten the bolts. She thanks you with trembling hands. Doesn't speak your name. Doesn't even ask it. She says, "I'll pray for you." Then she leaves. You stand there for a moment, breath fogging the cold air, wondering what the prayer will sound like. If it will have your name in it, or just him again. It's enough, but only just. You've considered changing your name. Starting fresh. A new village, a new trade, a new identity. But names don't travel alone. The silence follows. The avoidance. The way crowds bend around you like reeds in a stream. You could call yourself anything. The outcome would be the same. Because what people react to isn't your name. It's the weight of it. The unspoken ledger you carry in your shoulders. The invisible stain you wear like a second skin. You're what you do. And what you do stays in the room long after you've left it. One night, your partner says it, your full name, softly, across the table, after a long silence. You blink. You hadn't heard it in weeks. Months, maybe. You look up. They just smile. Just wanted to remind you, they say that you're still in there. You don't answer, but your hand still, your chest tightens. Later, when the house is asleep and the fire is burned low, you say it aloud yourself. Once, quietly, like a secret prayer. It echoes in the rafters for a moment, then fades, but it stays in your chest like warmth. Your gravestone is already carved. You did it yourself. A single slab of gray stone behind the house. Beside your father's. No taites. No epitaph. Just your name. Nothing more. Nothing less. One day, someone will walk past it. They might pause. You sleep, but not always well. The bed is firm, the house warm, the blankets worn soft by years of careful folding. And still, the dreams come, not nightly, but enough to remind you. The swing, the gasp, the hush of the crowd. Sometimes you dream of missing the mark. The axe bouncing, the sound it makes. It always wakes you. Other nights are stranger. You stand at the gallows, but the condemned is faceless. Just a shape kneeling, breathing, waiting. You raise the blade, and it slips through like air. No sound, no weight. Just failure stretching endlessly beneath your feet. You wake up drenched in sweat, breathing hard, as if you'd run a mile in your sleep. You don't speak of it. Not to your partner. Not to your child. Especially not to yourself. Because you've made peace with the work. Haven't you? You've accepted the task, the toll, the silence. You've built your life around the ritual. But dreams don't care. They come sharpened, and they always know where to cut. You tried once, years ago, to banish the dreams with drink. 3 cups too many. You woke up sprawled on the floor beside the hearth, your boots still on, the axe lying next to you like a dog that hadn't left your side. You swore off excess after that. Another time, you tried burning herbs. Mugwort, sage, crush mint. Your mother used to say they kept bad spirits away. The smoke made your eyes sting. The dreams still came. Eventually, you stopped trying to outrun them. Instead, you let them come. Sat with them like old companions you didn't invite but couldn't turn away. They arrive quieter now. Less blood, more silence. But they still watch you, and you never quite know when they'll return. Your child has begun having dreams too. You hear it in the way they shift under the blanket, in the soft grunts, the muttered words. Once you found them standing in the kitchen at dawn, staring at the blade above the hearth like it had called to them. They said they didn't remember getting up. You nodded. You didn't push. You recognized that look, the heavy eyelids, the tired defiance. You wore it once too. You wear it still. The legacy doesn't just pass through muscle and memory. It bleeds into the dark spaces behind your eyes. Some nights, you sit beside their bed and watch the rise and fall of their chest. Just to remind yourself they're still breathing. Still here. Still theirs, not the town's. Not yet. Your partner worries, but says little. They place a hand on your shoulder sometimes, especially after a harder sentence. They never ask what you dreamed. They don't need to. They already know. The room says it. The silence speaks louder than any answer. Once you heard them praying, quietly behind closed doors. Not for forgiveness. Not even for peace. Just for release. A word said with so much weight, it almost cracked the air. You didn't interrupt. You just stood there, listening, wanting the same thing. You keep a journal now. Not like the ledger. That's for facts, for history. This is different. Just short notes. Dreams. Flashes. You write them down so they don't live only inside your skull. You thought it might help. It didn't. But at least now they exist somewhere else. One entry just reads. His face didn't look afraid. Just disappointed. You don't remember who he was. Or if he was real. Another. The blade melted. I kept swinging anyway. Most nights, you don't write anything. You just sit at the table, pen in hand, and stare at the ink until it dries in the well. The worst dreams are the ones that twist what actually happened. The ones that take a clean swing and change it. Add screaming where there was silence. Add a mistake where there was precision. Those are the ones that make you doubt, not just your memory, but your whole past. Was that job really smooth? Did the man flinch? Was there more blood than there should have been? You reread the ledger, sometimes just to steady yourself. The names are there, the dates, the outcomes. No diamonds, just records. Like anchors, but even stone erodes. You've thought about stopping, laying down the axe, letting someone else, your child, or another, take it up. But what would you do instead? What does a man who's known only the weight of the blade do with empty hands. There's no land to till, no trade to resume. Your fingers are too shaped by leather and steel to turn to pottery or weaving. And even if you could, who would buy from you? You once considered becoming a scribe. Your partner laughed gently, not mockingly. "You be good," they said, "but your ink would be too heavy." They weren't wrong. So you keep going, swing by swing, sleep by sleep. The dreams never stop, but neither do you. You learn to live with them like wolves pacing just outside the firelight. You feed them little things, careful rituals, whispered names, precise notes in the ledger. Sometimes that's enough. Other times it isn't. But dawn always comes, even when your hands shake, even when you wake screaming, even when you wake without remembering why your heart won't slow. Dawn always comes, and with it another name. One dream stays with you more than the others. You're standing at the scaffold. The square is empty. No condemned, no crowd, just the gallows. You walk up the steps, look down at the block, and it's your own name carved there, not in ink, but in deep, brutal gouges. You look around, call out. No one answers. You try to speak, but your mouth is full of ash. Then you wake, always just before you swing. You've had that 3 times. You never tell anyone, but you keep a tally mark in the corner of the journal each time it comes. 3 so far. You pray there won't be a 4th. Night doesn't scare you, but the in-between, the hour where the fire has gone low and the crows haven't yet stirred, that's when the weight is heaviest. That's when the dreams hover just above your chest. Watching, waiting. You've learned how to fight them, but you still hope each night for something else. A dream of your child laughing. The last time is never marked on the calendar. No red circle, no note in the ledger saying today it ends. It just arrives, quietly, like most things in your life. You wake up, stretch your back slower than usual, and something in the air feels different. Still, expectant, not fearful, not grim, just waiting. The sheriff comes early, earlier than ever before. You're already dressed, boots laced, gloves hanging by the door. You meet him outside the fence. He doesn't step past it, just hands you the parchment, as he always does. Except this time, there's no name, just a phrase, the last one. You raise your eyebrow, but he only shrugs. Counsel's decision. He doesn't wait for your response. He never does. You close the gate behind you with a soft click. Then you look at your hands, the same ones that have swung for decades. And you whisper, just one more. You prepare like always. Clean the axe, sand the handle, oil the edge, lay out the cloth, the gloves, the apron. You move slower now, but not less steady. The ritual has muscle memory older than your doubt. Your partner watches from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. You could say no, they say. You could. For the first time in your life, you could refuse. There would be no consequence now. The council already agreed it's the last. There's no one else. No replacement. You pause, but only for a moment. One more, you reply. They nod, not in approval, not in sorrow, just in understanding. You were always going to finish what you started. You walk to the square with boots heavy from more than mud. The scaffold stands as it always has. Somehow it looks smaller now. Or maybe you've just grown beyond its shadow. The crowd is different today. Not larger. If anything, it's thinner. But they're quiet, reverent almost. Not in fear, not in satisfaction, just acknowledgement. You see faces you recognize from years past. Some who spat at your boots. Some who nodded with respect. Even the children stay still. No yelling, no crying, no bravado. You climb the steps alone. You always have, but today, the wood creaks like it remembers. Like it's saying goodbye too. The condemned stands tall. A man about your age. Weathered. Thin. Eyes steady. He meets your gaze. Not in defiance, but in clarity. Long time coming, he mutters. You nod. There's no need to speak. He kneels without prompting. Places his head on the block like it's a pillow. You adjust his shoulders gently. The crowd exhales together. Your axe feels light. Too light, but your grip holds. You whisper something only the blade hears. A phrase you haven't used in years. Maybe not ever. Then one breath. One weight shift. One swing. It ends. Clean. There's no cheer. No gasp. Just the wind picking up slightly blowing a strand of hair across your face. You wipe it away and begin the cleanup. Like always, you wrap the body, fold the cloth, wipe the block. Your child helps. Silently. They know what this means. They've known for weeks, maybe longer. Together, you place the body on the cart. The wheels groan, but don't fight. You push it toward the edge of town. No one follows. No one needs to. This, too, is part of the ritual. By the time you return, the square is empty. The scaffold stands alone. You look at it once more, then turn your back to it. For the first time, you don't look over your shoulder. At home, the axe goes on its hook. But this time, you place it differently. Not ready for next time, simply resting. Your gloves go into the drawer. The apron is washed, then folded and packed away. You don't speak while you do this. You don't need to. That night, your partner sets the table for 3, not 4. The child does not ask why. The ledger stays closed. And for the first time in decades, the fire doesn't reflect off steel. The town doesn't speak of it. No letters arrive. No ceremony is held. But you feel the difference. When you walk past the market, people nod more openly. When you pass the chapel, the priest glances your way. Not with invitation, but with recognition. One day, the baker says your name. Out loud. Not in fear. Just a greeting. You nod back. Your voice cracks a little when you reply. It still fits. Your name. Like an old coat pulled from the back of a closet. You spend your days slower now. Fixing tools. Mending fences. Watching the sky change through the seasons. You still keep the ledger near, but the ink has dried in its well. You open it sometimes, just to remind yourself that you existed, that you did what others wouldn't. Your child finds other work, something with animals. They're good with their hands, but better with gentleness. You're proud of that. They keep the axe wrapped in cloth under their bed, just in case, but neither of you speak of it. It's there, like memory, like warning, but not as destiny. Your partner plants new herbs along the fence. The flowers bloom brighter now. Maybe the soil has changed, or maybe something has lifted. The house feels lighter too, as if silence itself has loosened its grip. You still dream, but the dreams are quieter. Less blood, more trees. You once dreamed of your own father, standing beside you, neither of you speaking, just watching a river together. You woke up with your fist unclenched. That hasn't happened in years. One spring afternoon, you sit behind the house, sun on your face, a cup of cider in your hand. A neighbor walks by with a child. The child waves. You wave back. The neighbor does not stop, but he doesn't look away either. And for the first time, you feel like a man who once was the executioner, not someone who still is. It's a small difference, but it matters. You sip your drink. So now the axe rests, not as a symbol, not as a threat, just as an object that no longer needs to remember. The house, once heavy with silence and duty, exhales at last. The walls creak in softer tones.